Welcome to the International School of Tailoring. My name is Reza and this is lesson number 30 of our How to Make a Bespoke Jacket series. In the previous lesson, we learned all about the fundamentals of colors. In this lesson, we are going to make the undercollar of our traditional model. Making an undercollar is not as labor-intensive as the body canvas that we made together. In fact, it may be one of the first things you get to work on when you begin your apprenticeship. So, if you want to increase your chances of getting a placement with a tailor, learning how to make an undercollar will make you a lot more useful than when you don't know how to make one. For our traditional model, we are going to make a felt-backed undercollar. This is a very common way of making undercolors and it's an industry standard. Sometimes instead of felt, melton is used. Why do we use felt instead of melton? There are three reasons that I have for this. Reason number one, melton is woven, felt is not. That gives us a lot more room to maneuver around with our pattern and so we're not limited to the grain of the fabric. Reason number two is that for felt, you have a bigger range of thicknesses available, which makes it a lot better if you're working with different fabrics of different thicknesses. The third reason is that the color ranges that are available for felts are way better and a lot more diverse than the color ranges that are available for meltons. So, this is what we're going to do. First, we're going to cut out our felts, machine it together, then we're going to put it on our canvas, baste it up, and last but not least, we're going to pad all of them together to make them one. You ready? Let's go. Take your felt on the double. If there are creases on it, remove them with your iron. And if you're using a domestic iron, be very careful. Those things can burn stuff very quickly. Take your pattern. Because we're working with felt, we don't have to worry about the grain line. If, however, you're using melton, this is the line that you have to match with the straight grain of the fabric so that this part falls on the bias. That's very important. But for now, we're going to position it like so, making sure that we have plenty of room at the center back of our pattern. If you've drafted your pattern yourself, don't forget to shorten your pattern for the reasons that I explained at the end of the previous lesson. Now, keep your hands on, sharpen your chalk, and trace all around. Next, mark your shoulder line. This will be a good reference for when you're putting on the undercollar. Now, depending on your pattern, the angle of this line may be different, but that's irrelevant. Add 3/8 or 1 centimeter of seam allowance to your center back, like so. Now, before you cut it out, extend your chalk line on the shoulder line. Cut it out. Next, mark stitch your shoulder point. 3 mark stitches should be plenty. Cut through, trim, and now we're going to go to the machine. You're going to start machining about 1/2 inch, that's 1.2 centimeters away from the edge, and move towards the edge. Once you're at the edge, you're going to go all the way to the opposing edge, and then to back tack, move again another 1/2 inch into the surface. And we're back. To reduce bulk, trim away diagonally from the seam allowances. Be careful that you don't cut the thread. This is just the corners. Next, open up the seam and press it flat. Apply some moisture and set it. If you have any blips right on the edge of the stand, simply and carefully correct them. More corrections to be followed later. Now, move this over and bring your canvas. Remove all the creases and wrinkles that are in the canvas. No need to soak and wet it. Next, put your felt so that the seam is facing the canvas, like so. Your center back line should be perpendicular to the cut edges of the canvas. Now it's time to mark the stand. Take your ruler and mark 1.25 inches from the edge of your stand onto your materials. This is going to be a rough marking for us to baste on, which represents your break line. Thread your needle and baste loosely on the line that you just marked. Our second basting line is going to be 1/4 away from the outer edges of the fall. Once that's done, it's time to cut all around. Now it's time to mark the inlays. Flip everything over and mark your center line with a pen or pencil. Make sure it's permanent. Take a piece of chalk and mark 1.25 inches right on the outer edges of the fall and the gorge. Then we're going to mark 1 inch around the edge of the fall. Last but not least, lift up the canvas to mark the shoulder line. Marking done. Now it's time to pad the collar. But before we get to pad our color, me and you are going to have a bit of fun. If you're following this lesson with our foundation bundle, which you can buy from our website, inside that bundle, you'll find a yarn card with waxed silamide thread wrapped around it. Inside the thread are going to be 3 number 7 needles, and we're going to need these to pad the collars, to pad the lapels, and to finish off the jacket. But before we get to use it, we have to know how to prepare it, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. You're going to love this. So, the first thing we have to do is to take all the 3 needles out. We are going to need these needles, so we don't want to lose them. And so, it's best to put them on the side before we continue. Then, we have to remove the thread and unwrap it from around the card. So, simply unwrap the thread from around the card. Put the ends together and find the middle line of the thread. Now, what we're going to do is to make a hole in between these 2 top corner cuts. So go ahead and make a hole right down the middle. You can use a pin because that's a lot easier to push down than a normal needle. Now, on either side of that hole, make 1 more hole, like that and like that. These holes are going to be the holes for our needles. Now, we are going to fold the card along this line that we made the holes in, and that's going to be like this. Okay? Take an arm's length of basting thread and hook the basting thread into the cut that is right above the text. Okay? And wrap it around these 2 cuts twice. That's once. And that's twice. So now it's hooked well. Now we're going to wrap the thread around the entire card 10 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Okay, make sure it's wrapped nice and snug. So bring the threads together like so. And now to fasten off, simply lift off this flap here, bring the thread right underneath it, pull to get it inside the cuts, and wrap the thread around 2 more times. Once, twice. And then to finish it off, you can bring it underneath this flap and simply cut the thread. Now it's time to put our needles in there. So 1 by 1, put your needles inside, like so. Now it's time to secure the thread, the waxed thread, to our card. What you have to do is the following. Flip the card over so that the logo is upside down and the needles are facing upwards. Okay? Bring the thread close together like that. And now we need a strip of fabric. Obviously, if you have the bundle and you have the card, you'll have some silicea, and you can cut a strip of 20 centimeters, that's 8 inches long, and 1 centimeter wide. Just make sure that you cut it so neatly along the grain that you can fray the edges and that it looks nice without any jagged lines, okay? You can also use a ribbon if you wish. Now, place this ribbon underneath the card, put your finger on it, and fold both ends upwards like this to create a U shape, okay? And if you go all the way down, you have a sharper corner like a V. Now, bring both ends on top of one another, grab the card like so, and slightly push with your thumb in the center of the card to create a gap between the thread and the card, like so. Now, as you're doing that, slide the end of the ribbon underneath the basting thread, like this, and pull it halfway up. Take your wax thread and put it underneath the basting threads. The next thing that you have to do is to simply pull the ends through the loop, hold the card, pull the loop upwards and forwards, like this. Once it looks like that, grab both ends of the thread and pull into the opposite direction. You can adjust this to bring it right down the middle. And that's it. Now you've prepared your card and your threads. You can simply pin it against something or hang it up. Now, if you want to take one of these threads out, simply grab the entire bunch at the bottom, take one of the strands out like that, and just pull. And without the rest getting entangled, you can take one thread out. All right? And that's how you do it. This is a great way to prepare your thread so that you can use it very easily, pull them out without the rest of these threads being entangled into one another. And you also keep your needles right with the card and the appropriate thread. Don't lose the needles. We're going to need them during the process of the making of our jacket. This is also a great way to prepare your own thread. If you don't have a card, you can simply use the same method with this ribbon to wrap around and loop around your thread and hang it up someplace nice. And that's how you do it. Let's continue. So now that we've prepared our thread, let's talk a little bit about what the hell these lines are based on. I can imagine that you are very curious to know, why did we mark 1.25" or 1 inch, etc. for all these lines? Well, the basting that we have here, which was a marking that we did on this side, represents the break line. This is a temporary line that we have drawn just so that we can do our padding. Once the color is padded completely, we are going to accurately and permanently draw this line so that we have always the right reference to go to when it comes to the creasing. The lines that you see here are basically marking how much inlay we have. When I drafted the pattern for this color, I allowed 1.25" of inlay below the gorge line and on the sides and on the end of the fall. So, not to waste my stitches and my time, I mark where the inlay is so that I don't pad beyond it. So really, the width of these lines and their position depends on how you've drafted your color and how much inlay you've added. That's all. Let's start with our padding. Know that these chalk lines are going to fade away as you're working on it. So it's good to have a piece of chalk to always remark them as you're working on them so that you don't lose your way on the surface of the color. If you want, you can make smoother lines of your temporarily short dotted lines like that, just to have a better overview. And if you want to make a mark on top of your bastings for more accuracy, you can do that as well, like so. I don't advise you use a pencil or a pen to mark these inlays because you want the chalk lines to brush off so that you can see what you are going to mark as your final line when it comes to cutting the final shape of the color. All right, let's take our thimble, let's take one of our needles and one of our threads. We don't want to use any thick threads for the padding of our collars or our lapels. So we either have to use an overlocking thread or do what I do, and that is going to be to split one of these silamide wax threads into two, pull them apart, very easily to do, like so. And now we have two threads that are thin enough for us to use for our padding, and it's still quite strong and flexible, of course. So let's begin. Thread your needle, take your collar. If you're right-handed, you're going to work from the center right to left. If you're left-handed, you have to flip it over and work from the center left to right. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start right on the edge of my inlay here on my break line, and I'm going to do a padding all the way down to this inlay and move my way upwards, up and down between this area, okay? The marking here marks our shoulder line, and we'll get to that once we have padded the stand. So let's first pad the stand. Insert your needle away from the point that you're about to begin and bring the top of your needle out. Hide your thread underneath and between the two materials, like so, and then go back right behind where you came out, take a small bite so that only a small tiny dot is visible, and pull, like so. Don't pull too tight. Now, we're going to go 3/8 down. Again, take a very small bite, that's 1 centimeter. The bite size is about 3 millimeters, that's 1/8. And it should not really be visible on this side, okay? So you only catch a small amount. Don't pad with the whole needle showing, all right? It should look as if nothing is visible. So let's go up and down and pad our color. All right, so now that I've got all the way down and I've secured the layers on the break line, I want to, of course, pad the color in the shape that I want it to be. So I'm going to fold this down like so, and the entire stand, excluding the inlays, of course, is going to be padded while I hold it like that. Now, you don't need to roll the color all the way like so. It only matters the fact that you fold this over and create the shortness that is needed to keep this completely flat like so, okay? So if you have to, put a pin in there to hold it, just so that you have some extra help, and pad your way up. When you're almost running out of thread and you want to fasten off, simply go in and behind the last point where your thread has come out and bring the needle in between the two layers so it's not visible from this side, and allow it to travel about 1/2 inch, 5/8, that's 1.5 centimeters, like that, so that now your ending point is hidden, and cut your thread. And to start right where you left off, bring the needle in from a little distance away from your last ending point, come out that point, like so, hide the end of your thread, and go right behind it again, make a small bite, almost invisible, and continue. So once you've done the stand and you look at it from behind, it should look like this. Tiny dots that show that padding has been done, but not so crude for you to see the actual threads, okay? Now, I also usually leave about 5 millimeters to 1/4 completely free at the bottom edge of the stand, because by the time we have padded and done a lot of things to this collar, this edge is going to be distorted. So I trim this edge once I've creased the final break line, and then I make everything nice and smooth, and then layer the canvas back by 3 millimeters by simply cutting it away. I'll show you how to do that. Now it's time to do the fall. So I'm going to swap this over again from the center, right to left if you're right-handed, left to right if you're left-handed. What I'm going to do now is I'm not going to go up and down all the way. I'm only going to go up and down between the area of the back neck. This area that you see here is going to be padded in a different direction. But before we get to that, we're going to do exactly what we did on the stand between our shoulder lines. We have now padded the stand of the collar and the back of the fall. What you see is a slight roll, and that is the perfect demonstration of relative layer length. The layer underneath is shorter than the layer on top, which pulls the top layer inwards, causing that curl. What we now want to do is to pad the sides, okay? Now imagine that this collar is going to be folded like this and is going to go around the neck, okay? Now this area we want to encourage to slightly roll downwards so that when we put this on our jacket, the sides don't flick up and curl up like that, okay? So this is what we're going to do. Take some thread, split in two, separate, thread your needle, and now what I want you to do is to break the basting that you have right on these edges. You don't need to take them out, just break them up so that they can move if they have to, because we want this underneath layer to be flexible and be able to move out as we are padding the color. So mark your inlays again because they will fade. Take the color, flip it up so that you can see the area that you're working on, and pad up and down as you're rolling this like that. Don't roll it up and curve it in the direction of the shape. Just roll it in this direction. That's it, okay? Perfectly horizontal. That's one side done. As you can see, the color is rolling over itself like that, and in this area, it's kind of like rolling over in that direction. Now, technically speaking, eventually on the jacket, this area is going to be a concave surface. The reason why we don't pad it in that direction is because too much encouragement in that direction may get the ends of the color to flick up. So if we pad it in this way, by the time it automatically goes into that concave direction, the ends will always be encouraged to kind of like roll downwards and sit nice and flat on the chest and the shoulder. Okay, now let's do this side. Now we've done the other side as well. It's time to take the basting threads out. Let's have a look and see what we have done. First of all, we have padded the color so that the break line is now encouraged to fold or roll back onto itself. We have also padded the rest of the color to slightly curve downwards so that when the color goes around the neck, the ends of the color don't flick up but remain flat on the chest and the neck area. So what are we going to do now? Well, first of all, let's put an iron on top of our color to make it nice and smooth and free of wrinkles. It's okay to press the color flat at this stage. You're not removing the shape. Now, as you can see, there are some misalignments now after the padding of the color. That's of course because we have been rolling the color as we've padded, and so some of the felt has been passed out from the edges of the canvas. The next thing to do is to, of course, mark the crease line, shape the color, then fold the color along the crease line, and then from the crease line downwards, mark the new stand edge. Shaping the color will distort the color edge. So we can't just mark a perfect line, cut, and then shape, because the shaping will distort that line. So what we do is the following. Instead of marking the exact 1.25 inch height from the edge, we are going to mark a little bit higher, then mark our break line, shape the color, then fold it back, and now we have a wider stand, but that's okay because we're going to trim some of that away, and then we're going to measure 1.25 inch downwards all the way from one edge to the other, and then trim it nice and neat. Okay, so this is what you're going to do. Grab your ruler and a pencil and measure 1 3/8, that's 3 millimeters, that's 1/8 wider than the color stand. So that's about 3.5 centimeters. 1 3/8 from the edge. And you can mark this with a pencil. Just make short, small steps so that you can manage to eventually connect them nicely. Once you've done that, you can then connect your lines by simply drawing a new line between them. Like so. Now, for those of you who are OCD and super fussy, you don't and you can't be accurate up to the 0.5 millimeter here. What matters is that you have a nice curve that goes from one side to the other and is about 1 3/8 all the way through. Now, if you've seen the lesson on edge to fold transfers, we want to fold this concave line back on itself and maintain a concave shape along the folded edge. You can see if I try to fold this onto the break line, I get a lot of tension here. So what do we do? Very simple. Grab the spray bottle, apply some moisture, take your iron, and gently stretch out the stand. You don't need a heavy iron for this. All you need is some patience, some moisture, and some heat. Okay, so now that you've done that, and it's almost in an opposite curve, simply go in with the iron to smooth out the areas where your iron hasn't gone any further, like so. We can fold back the stand without any tension. You can see as I fold it back, there is already a concave line. Now we have to be a bit more accurate and crease the color right on that break line that we have drawn. Now, depending on what type of material you're using, it may take a while for this to be able to actually crease completely flat, but you can always use a block and some extra moisture to completely dry it off. So I'm going to use a little bit more moisture and continue pressing. We can just simply take a block, dry it off, fold it back, and now we have our color. You can also press from this side to make sure that the crease is really nice and smooth and thin. And as you can see, as I'm pressing this with the iron, I'm curving it as much as I can. Now, flip this over, and now we're going to mark the actual final edge. Take your ruler and mark 1.25 inches, that's 3.2 centimeters, all around the stand. So now that we've marked, we can now cut right along this new line and have a perfect parallel stand from the crease line, that's the break line, all the way to the stand edge. Get it all out of the way. And if you want, you can slightly curve these corners, like so and like so. Flip it over, reduce all the felt that's been passed out. Flip it over, there's going to be some excess canvas that you can also cut away. And that's it. That's your color prepared for a fitting. There are going to be a few more steps involved once we get to finish the undercolor, but for now, this is all we need. As you can see, the construction of the undercolor on its own is not very complicated. It's just basically 2 layers that are joined together with a padding stitch. You may find it a bit more difficult to put the undercolor on the jacket, but we'll try to make that as easy as possible in the next lesson. Now, we have created this series for everyone around the world to follow along, regardless of the resources that they have available to them. That is why these videos are and will forever be free. But there is a problem. The problem is that even though everyone can benefit from these videos and learn tailoring with these lessons, not everyone will have access to the materials that are required to have the best possible experience. We understand that problem and therefore have come up with a solution. That is the good news. We have assembled 2 bundles that you can purchase from our website so that you have the best possible experience. Those 2 bundles are the Foundation Bundle and the Improvers Bundle. The Foundation Bundle is what you'll need if you want to make the traditional model, which is a very basic and easy to make jacket to go through the foundation of coat making. The Improvers Bundle is for those of you who understand the basics, have got some experience, and now want to sharpen up their skills by stepping up towards a more advanced model, which is the Pagoda model. All you have to do is to simply visit our website, which you can find by clicking on the link in the description of this video, and treat yourself to one of these bundles to make the most out of these lessons. My name is Reza, this was today's lesson, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Take care. Generally speaking, making an undercolor is not as elaborate as the body canvas that can we